You can see it's nice and hot. So he holds it down, he lets it drip off the end of that iron. But he's doing it in a way that he can control it. If it gets too hot, it would just drip to the floor. If it's not hot enough, then it doesn't go very hot. But Chris has got over 20 years of glass making experience, so he makes it look pretty easy. But what a beautiful drop out there, and a nice tall bubble. And you might notice that there's still a little thickness on the very bottom of that bubble as well. That's done on purpose. We need to put glass where we want it to be bigger. So he's allowed this tall neck to form, but leaving plenty of glass on the bottom to continue to blow it out to make the belly of our pitcher. That's what he's making here today. He's a pitcher for you. So in addition to our melting furnace, we also have our remelting furnace. Okay, this one also runs at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but there's no actual glass inside of there. Okay. So you'll see when he first comes back to the heat, he goes all the way in. We need to make sure that the glass doesn't get too cold as he works. Even though he's going to be concentrating the most heat where he wants to make changes, if any one part of this bubble gets too cold, it'll start to crack or thermally shock. Is there anyone here who's ever taken an ice cube and you throw it into a soda or a warm water or something and it pops and it cracks? That's an example of thermal shock. It just means the ice is trying to expand really quickly with the heat, but it can't hold itself together, so it just pops and cracks apart. Our glass does a similar thing. When it's heating up, it's expanding just a little bit. And when it's cooling and it's more lower in ranges, then it starts to shrink. So if that expansion or contraction happens too suddenly, and I'm not talking about the volume, like he's blowing it out, I'm talking on a molecular level as the glass starts to cool and shrink, then that can cause thermal shocks and cracks to form pretty easily. So in theory, we could have melted glass on one end and broken glass on the other of a vessel. We're not careful about keeping those stable. So all the way in, right there, giving it a little flash heat. When I taught classes, I used to tell my students, it's kind of like going to visit your grandma. When you get there, you give her a big hug, get all that warm, and then you have your visit, do what you need to do, and then when you're ready to leave, you give her another big warm hug before you go and leave the situation. So we're always keeping those temperatures nice and balanced. Whoa. Look at this little gravity. Every movement of the gaffer translates into that material. The speed at which we turn can either keep things off center and lagging and dripping, or it can wing things away from center. If we find the right turning speed, everything stays balanced. If we hold it down, it elongates. If we hold it up, it compresses. So we're also very conscious of the angles of our pipes. That's another phrase from teaching beginners. Big angles cause big problems. So live in the middle range while you're getting comfortable and slowly start to give the angles you need to get that glass to move in more dramatic ways. But I see George is already with a paddle here. He's going to help Chris collapse the bottom of this vessel. But this time we're not actually going to be using wet wood. We're going to use dry wood because now the bubble is a lot thinner. We're not looking at nearly the heat that we had when we used the wooden block at the beginning. So a wet paddle could actually crack the surface of that glass because it's slightly thinner and colder.
It's burning the wood.
So we just pick and choose whether we're using dry wood with the glass is a little colder and thinner, or we can use that wet wood anytime we're using super hot glass. All right, so nice picture shape. And yes, that is compressed air. He's just using that to kind of speed up the cooling process a little bit.
It was burning the wood.
It's kind of like watching paint dry. There's just moments where you just don't need to sit there anymore. You can help it along a little bit. What you need, Chris? One of your turquoise? Sure. All right, so we're getting ready to trade this from one iron to the other. This transfer process is pretty common in glass blowing. You pretty much finish the bottom half of something when it's on the blowpipe. Then you flip it around and you be able to shape up the top half. So this little connection that we make, this is called a punty. You just use a piece of glass to find center there. A little indicator mark. You can see that connection. When it breaks this free at the end, it probably will leave a little scar mark. And that's really the key to looking for handmade glass, looking and see if you see that little scar mark in this transfer process. But like everything, it's a delicate balance of timing and temperature. So a little cold, wet water, and a light tap. Beautiful job. Very nice. They make this look so easy. So now that we've got this traded around, we can start to focus heat on the top half. It's really all about positioning objects where they can be heated the most efficiently. Whatever's furthest away from you often goes into the hole first and out last. So that's naturally going to be the hottest place. So by the time we flip this around, he's not going to change the bottom half. He just needs to make sure it doesn't crack. But do we have any questions or curiosities? We have a little time while we're waiting for the glass to get hot.
Is it going to get big?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Is it going to get bigger?
Is it going to get bigger? It's not necessarily in volume-wise going to get that much bigger. He's already kind of blown it up as much as it's going to be blown up. But he does have some refinement to do to the top edge. He's going to be making a pitcher. So that pitcher needs to have a cut on the top. That's going to create the spout effect. So that's the one major change. And then we'll add a handle to it as well. So visually, yeah, sure.
Okay.
He's already inflated pretty much as he's going to.
Thank you.
Once you remove it from the blowpipe, there's really only one option. Well, if you can see that cone tool that's there connected to the air hose, he could get the tip really hot and then seal up with the cone and add more air pressure, inflate the top edge of the piece. And sometimes we'll do things like that. If we've got a big flare that we want to make, instead of just wrenching the glass open, we maybe tuck it, make it a little bigger, a little wider. And then when we wrench it open, it gives more of a curve than if we just move that glass on its own. But I don't think he's going to do that for this particular one. Any other questions? No? Looks like you ladies made your own things today, or did you buy stuff today? Did some projects, take-home projects? Yeah. Awesome. I forgot. I was like, oh, it's either something you made or it's something you're going to make when you get home. That sounds like fun. Here's that trim I was talking about. It's a pair of shears, pretty much a pair of scissors. With just the right temperature, you can trim all the way around that glass. But you hit the pan that was already cold, already kind of cracked. You got to work quick with this material. It cools off very rapidly. And especially as you're trimming away the top edge, if you don't get all the way around and it starts to cool and harden, then you're just cracking the glass. But Chris always is a really good trimmer. It always gets nice and hot all the way around. Although I think you're sitting on
Unless you're making any one of this stuff.
There we go. Is this a lip wrap? All right. So sometimes we add a little extra glass. Yeah, and this big one here. You see how there's this smooth band of clear all the way around the top? So this is something we call a lip wrap. Now we could roll that glass in color, make it a colored lip wrap, add a nice little accent. But for the most part, we're just going to look clear on clear. So it's just a visual decoration. So he draws it out to the thickness he wants, and then just traces all along. When he's done, I'll just whip it away, real quick. Just the heat of the material kind of like separates itself. Like separating a caramel bar or something. There's a certain point where it's just going to separate on its own. That's a really nice little addition. We'll often have a lot of combinations of hollow and solid to make a final form. So all of these solid bits of glass that we're adding, we call them bits. We're adding bits of glass to the surface. But this next bit's going to be the handle part.
I see.
And George is doing right now what he calls air marbling. He's just kind of letting it cool and stabilize, keeping it on center. And then we actually marber on the marber table. So this is a big slab of metal. This helps shape and cool the glass. If you brought it over to Chris straight from the oven, it would just melt and puddle and just be a big blob. But by rolling it on this metal table, it gives structure to that glass. A little cold skin that holds everything together. He tapered it in just the right way so that when they attach it and pull it, it'll end up being a nice even handle. So the forethought of how to shape every bit that's brought to the gaffer is just as important as what happens once it reaches the gaffer and they shape it.
It shows right there. Let me see what it's
Decide how much he wants to take. Immediately flip over, because look at how hot this is going to be. It's going to flop right back on
Oh,
itself.
it's missing the handle.
We call that a gravity handle. Maybe you can figure out why. But beautifully done. Very nice. Now, handles are one of the last things that we add. They're pretty delicate. If he's not careful, that would noodle right back onto the side of the vessel. But under the skilled glassworker of over 20 years of glass blowing experience, he makes this whole thing look pretty effortless. So final slash. This will allow the vessel to stay warm, but allow the handle to cool off. We need to balance these temperatures before we allow the whole thing to cool. And cooling of the glass is actually one of the longest parts of the process. Because that thermal shock we were talking about, the expansion contraction, if we do that too quickly or unevenly, then it's going to fall apart. It's going to break and crack. If we take that same piece and put it away in an oven and let it cool slowly under controlled conditions, then it'll all shrink at the same rate. The thick handle, the thin walls, and the vessel, and it'll avoid all that thermal shock, and that's why we get nice stable pieces. But the amount of time it takes to cool is all based on the thickest part in the oven. So all these somewhat thin items that we make for demonstrations are usually just an overnight cycle, maybe 12 to 16 hours. If you wandered through our innovations area today, you saw that giant casting of the telescope mirror. That took nearly a year to cool. And that was before they had controllers that would do it automatically. They just have to go and tweak the controller a little bit every day and let that heat
It really takes 1 year to pull up,
over that entire year.
she said.
Beautiful. So a little bit of water on that punty. This will help shock that connection and separate it pretty cleanly.
Which one?
What do you think, folks? Isn't that a
One in
beautiful
the
picture?
middle.
Let's give Chris a huge round
Oh,
of
the
applause.
first one.
Very nicely done. Great way to finish our day. And in the oven it goes for slow cooling and safekeeping. Nice. Any other questions I can answer for you folks? Yes?
It's not really a question, but earlier when you said like it was the gravity handle, I think I know why it's called that because like you just let gravity like pull it down and then.
Sit back a little, let me see.
Exactly. You let gravity do some of the work to make that shape. So very observant. Good job. Any other questions or comments that you'd like to make? Well, fantastic, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got about half an hour left. The museum is open and the shops are open a little past that. But we thank you for joining us here today and staying safe with us throughout your visit. It's really important for us to stay open, so we really appreciate it. With that in mind, I'm bringing it up the stairs and out that back door. Bring you right back to the gallery.
Thank you. Where's China?
Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you. China, sit you. Oh my God, that was so cool. Wasn't that cool? You get to sit in the front. Yeah. We get to sit in the front and watch them make the glass. That was cool. Made glass in front of me. That's the coolest thing ever. Look, guys. Beautiful. Okay. You'll be working for a long time. Cunning is on the